I like the Resident Evil 3 remake better than the original. There, I said it. A lot of you probably just clicked off the video, and I don't blame you, but just hear me out. When I say I like it better, that doesn't necessarily mean I think it's a good remake, because it's not. It's a bit of a disappointing successor to Resident Evil 2 Remake, and it's not a good remake of the original at all, but it's a really enjoyable experience. I love just replaying the game over and over to see how fast I can do it, I love playing around with the infinite rocket launcher, and I do think the level design is pretty cool. In the original, it's really easy to get lost, and while the Raccoon City streets are definitely bigger and cooler in the original, they're much more intuitive in the remake. And overall, I just greatly prefer the over-the-shoulder third-person Resident Evil style, and that's the biggest thing that puts the remake over the original for me. While I do think the fixed camera angles and tank controls are still pretty fun and work really well in those old games, I do just prefer the modern style. But unfortunately, the remake is not at all without its flaws. It cuts so much content from the original, most notably the clock tower and the Gravedigger boss, but also some smaller stuff like the Raccoon Park and the Dead Factory in favor of Nest 2. I don't mind the scrapping of Raccoon Park because it wasn't that interesting to me, but the Dead Factory was way cooler than Nest 2. Nest 2 doesn't at all justify its existence and just feels like a lazy way to make the game more like RE2, which is not what RE3 should be like. The higher difficulties are also not balanced at all. I get that it's supposed to be harder, but it is completely unfair, especially the final boss. What? What was I supposed to do? Oh, and not to mention, Nemesis himself was the absolute best and scariest part of the original game, and he is so watered down in the remake. I do like some of his boss fights, but the way he stalks you in the original just always scared the shit out of me. He's cool for what he is in the remake, but not for what he's supposed to be. Also, the hospital and Carlos are a lot better in the remake. So yeah, I like RE3 Remake a lot, even a little better than the original. It's really fun to replay just casually, but honestly, an actual faithful remake of RE3 would probably rival RE2 Remake for me, and unfortunately we didn't get that. Resident Evil 9 is coming out really soon, in less than 2 weeks, and it's my most anticipated game, like, ever. I'm super excited for Leon's return since RE4 Remake was my first and favorite Resident Evil game, so as I've played through almost every single other game in the series, I've grown super attached to him as a character. His combat looks super fun, and the juxtaposition between him and Grace looks awesome. I think the whole idea of this game coming out for the 30-year anniversary of the series makes it extra special, especially the idea of returning back to the RPD, one of the franchise's most iconic locations, and probably my personal favorite location from the series. But it's not the first game where we return to the RPD. It was the primary location in Resident Evil 2, and then Jill goes there in RE3. In my opinion, that had a lot of untapped potential, as Jill was one of the STAR's team members, so seeing all her co-workers as zombies should have a big impact on her. It's not really touched upon very much in the original, and while I wasn't a Resident Evil fan back then, I would have hoped that the remake would change that, and show how it's affected her. But in the remake, Jill doesn't even go to the RPD, Carlos does, and while that section of the game was pretty cool, it just feels like a big missed opportunity. Leon in the original and remake of Resident Evil 2 doesn't really have that either, because he's new and doesn't know anyone, only meeting Marvin when he gets there. But now, it seems like RE9 is doing what RE3 Remake should have. It's showing the impact the zombified RPD truly had on Leon. I doubt there's any remains left of Marvin, but there's a lot of opportunity for Leon to feel survivor's guilt, and think about this place and Marvin and how they changed the trajectory of his whole life. I think that's a really cool thing to touch upon, and although RE3 Remake didn't do that, it seems like RE9 is taking that opportunity. However, it seems like that might not be the only place in Raccoon City that we'll be returning to. After RE9 was announced, I made it my personal mission to finish every Resident Evil game that I hadn't played yet, which at the time included the light gun shooters and the Outbreak games. There were a few games that I missed though, mostly because I got too annoyed by them and stopped playing, or ones I couldn't get working. I kinda gave up on the Outbreak games when I first played them, but I recently started streaming them with my friends Evan Agredano and LED, and I have to say, while I don't really like the first game in general, I do think it's pretty fun with friends, but we'll see if that holds true with File 2 because at the time I'm writing this I haven't finished the game yet. But on a recent Outbreak stream, Evan pointed something out to me that he'd heard about, and it was really interesting. The most recent RE9 trailer was amazing, and it upped my hype for the game even more. But there's one specific shot in the trailer that caught some people's eyes, and that's this one. It's a room on fire. Seems simple enough at first, but looking at the design of the room, it looks oddly familiar. The room is some kind of chapel with a carpet stripping through the middle of the room and leading up to an altar. And while it definitely is a bit different, take a look at this. This is the clock tower from Resident Evil 3. This room specifically is some type of chapel, with the carpet stripping through the middle of the room, leading up to an altar, and the candles on the altar are identically placed. So is it possible that since we're going back to Raccoon City, we'll actually end up in the clock tower from Resident Evil 3? Like I said, some things may or may not be there, but consider this. At the end of the trailer, we get a good look at the RPD, and it is noticeably the remake version, not the original. Notice the placement of the item box and typewriter, the statue placement, and the stairs leading up to the second floor, which is also very different in the original RPD. So, if this game is using the remake version of Raccoon City, then that means if theoretically the clock tower were to be in the game, it would be the remake clock tower, the one we never got to see. Is it possible that after the backlash of RE3 Remake's removal of the clock tower, they decided to put it in this game to try to make up for it? Honestly, I think it makes a lot of sense. Hell, maybe the Gravedigger will pop up in one way or another, or an enemy like it. Maybe Raccoon Park too, or the Dead Factory. Who knows, but we'll see very soon. I'll be streaming RE9 the day it comes out at 10 AM EST up until around 4 PM, and then I'll be streaming once again the day after pretty much for the whole day. My first playthrough will be first person Grace and third person Leon, and it will be on the hardest difficulty available at the start, and my second playthrough will be the inverse perspectives on whatever harder difficulty is unlocked upon completing the game, if the difficulty system remains the same as the previous games in the series. So stay tuned for that, and if you don't feel like watching live, I'll be editing down those streams into a full series of videos. Regardless, let me know your thoughts on the clock tower or any other Raccoon City areas being in RE9, like and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you guys later.